Chapter 38. Now, reckoned in pages, this chapter takes us past the halfway point of the novel. Reckoned in chapters, of course, the next chapter, 39, will mark the halfway point. Excuse me. It certainly works structurally, I think, to see this passage in the Knockwood Inn as the centrepiece of the novel. The lull in the narrative as everyone gathers round the fire at the Knockwoods and enjoys their adventures with brandy and cherry coke, meeting up with the astronomers again, of course. Before the West Line has begun, then, the novel takes a breath here at the Knockwoods Inn. That's all I have to say about it, really. "'Tis determined afterward that Mr. Dimdown, heretofore unacquainted with any confinement longer than hiding in the root cellar till the sheriff took his leave, had been drinking steadily whatever spirits came to hand for the 3 days previous, attempting, as he explains, to get the time to pass differently, that's all. Mr. Knockwood comes from round the bar, whilst Mrs. Knockwood, sorting her keys, heads for the musketoon in the china cabinet. And furthermore, Mr. Dimdown in a fury, how dare you fabulating little swine pretend to any knowledge of America, having sneaked on to our shores upon your miserable belly, and so on. There, now, gentlemen," the landlord, slowing his address as much as he can afford to, whilst keeping an eye upon his wife's progress with the powder horn, funnel and shot. "Mr. Dimdown, mind my chef now. I can't afford to lose him. And you, Frenchy? Filthy frog, dites adieu." Mr. Dimdown makes a murderous lunge with his blade, straight at the chef's unprotected heart. Immediately, inches short of its target, the weapon, from no cause visible to anyone, leaves Dimdown's grasp and sails across the room in a slow, some might say insolent, arc, directly in among the blazing logs of the hearth where none may reach. "'Twas magnetism or something," protests Mr. Dimdown, "and withal I stumbled, or was deliberately tripped up. Look ye, how am I to retrieve my bleeder now? The heat will ruin the steel, damn you, monsieur." "Thus," intones the Frenchman with a twirl of his toque, "the very duck in action. You have seen for yourselves. You have borne witness. Her capacity for flight having increased to ever longer distances in the years between then and now, till one day not even the vast ocean might deter her. Voila! I wake to find her perched at the end of the bed, quacking merrily as a milkmaid. Yes, she has followed me even to the new world, whether in affection or hatred, who can say? that 'tis passion none may dispute. And once again I am besieged as she continues upon her strange orbit of escape from the known world, whilst growing more powerful within it. To Louisa, this is beginning to sound like Peter Redzinger all over again. Upon an impulse, nevertheless, she places a somewhat larger than Parisian hand, a calloused working hand, cut and healed in 1,000 places, sun-brown, hair tucking, needle nimble, upon his arm. A close observer, did one attend, might see him begin to flicker round the edges. Oh, monsieur, an angel so? Perhaps, madame, it is merely the price I must pay for having left France. Yet, to be honest, coming from a place where people starve to death every night, if I must suffer the duck's inscrutable attendance in exchange for this miracle of plenty, then 'tis a bargain. On market days in Newcastle or Philadelphia, my heart yet soars as ever it has done, like a dream. Have you ever wanted to cook everything? The tomatoes, terrapins, peaches, rockfish, crabs, Indian corn, venison, bear, beaver, to create the beaver bourguignon. Who knows, perhaps even the beaver soufflé, no. He is gesturing excitedly. Sure, the Indians know how to cook beaver, she tells him. There's some glands you have to take out, and much fat to trim, but when 'tis done right, as good as anything from a German kitchen, plain or fancy. You have actually, he gazes at her, that is, eaten. In the days they are to remain snowbound, a triangle will develop among the incorruptible pietist, the exiled chef, and the infatuated duck. Strangely, given her great powers for mischief, the duck does nothing to harm Louisa, indeed extends to her the same invisible protection, as if sensing a chance to observe love at first hand, invisibly. Thus do Armand and Louisa, never knowing when she may be there watching, find one more obstacle in the way of bodily desires. She's being quite sympathetic about all this, don't you think? I don't know, Armand. Are you sure you've told me everything? My dearest, how could you even... She seems to know you so well. It does not, however, in fact, take long for the duck to grow far less certain than before that she even wishes an erotic life. Meanwhile, in their nival confinement, the behaviour of the company grows ever less predictable. And over my head, relates Squire Hullegast, it formed an eclipse, an emptiness in the sky, with a cloud-shaped line drawn all about it, wherein words might appear, and it read, No King. Thank you for sharing that with us, sir, snarls the dependably viperous Mr. Whitpot, the first upon whom the squire's oracular charm has begun to lose its grasp. as days of snow and snow clouds and dark, unpromising shades of blue pass one into another, the readiness of immoderate sentiment to burst forth upon any or no occasion is felt by all to be heightening dangerously. Even young Cherrycoke struggles with it, rosy fizz a-glimmer, seated at a table of local Dutch manufacture, writing in his memorandum book, as the snow lapses and wet silence cross the rhombic panes before him, whilst from his pen, in bright, increasingly bloody tropes, speculation upon the Eucharistic sacrament and the practice of cannibalism come a-spurting. It had begun in scholarly innocence, as a commentary upon an earlier essay by Brooke Taylor, the Series and Theorem eponym, on the lawfulness of eating blood. Mr. Knockwood observes from an upstairs window a depth of snow nearly level with the sill, and worrying about the supply of air in the rooms below, rushes to find and ask the astronomers. And what has happened to the light? Are there snow eclipses? Down in the pantry, Armand and Louisa are embracing, outdoing the sparkishness of even Philadelphian youth. Yet again, perhaps that is only what people bring out upon days when gossip is scarce, honouring the rest of their time, their manifest innocence. Whilst Mitzi, out in this taupe daylight, is hanging about the stable hands and scullery boys, swinging her hair, flashing her eyes, getting into conversations that she then tries to prolong to some point she can't clearly enough define to herself. She's grown up with murderous Indians in the woods all round, painted bare skins and sharpened blades. She has a different sense of danger than do these mild estuarial souls with their diet of fish, like a race of house cats so. Yet what she really wishes to prolong may be the state of never knowing exactly how safe she may be among the English fisher boys, as at first, at each new fall of snow, she has thrilled, knowing it means at least one more day of isolation with the inn's resident Adonises, or, as Armand, feeling increasingly paterfamilial, prefers slack-jawed louts. Lately, however, the winter has begun to oppress more than encourage her hopes. She actually starts looking about for chores to do, offering Armand her help in the kitchen, still a blush every time they speak. Louisa, as he is joyous to learn, having taught her at least the fundamentals. Soon he is allowing her to prepare salads and confiding minor arcana of French haute cuisine, its historical beginnings among the arts of the poisoner, its need to be carried on in an attitude of unwavering contempt for any who would actually chew, swallow, and attempt to digest it, and come back for more. The first 1,000 pot-lid settings from Le Gastro's famed article in the Encyclopédie. The pot-lid being indeed a particular hobby horse of Armand's, upon its proper arrangement often hanging the difference between success and failure. Off, on, all the way on, partly off, crescents of varying shape, each with its appropriate use. You must learn to think of the pot as you look down upon it as a sort of moon, with phases, though keeping in mind Voltaire's remark about gas and astronomers. The Reverend looks on with interest. The Frenchman fascinates him. With his recent animadversions upon the Lord's Supper, He is attending more to food and its preparation. I thought I had put behind me, he writes, the questions of whether the body and blood of Christ are consubstantiate with or transubstantiated from the bread and wine of the Eucharist, preferring at last to believe with doctors such as Hamo of Halberstadt that the outward forms are given to bread and wine as an act of God's mercy, for otherwise we should be repelled by the sight of real human flesh and blood, not to mention the prospect of eating it. Thus to God's attributes must be added the skills of a master chef, in so disguising a terrible reality. The question I cannot resolve is whether real flesh and real blood are themselves, in turn, further symbolic, either of some mystical body of Christ in which participants in the Lord's Supper all somehow, mystically to be sure, become one, or of a terrible opposite, some ultimate carnality, some way of finally belonging to the doomed world that cannot be undone, a condition, I now confess, I once roamed the earth believing myself to be seeking, all but asphyxiated in a darkling innocence which later generations may no longer fully imagine. But since those days of young hopes, illusory daybreaks, and the uncanny sureness of nerve, I have been down into other quarters of the city of earth, seen and smelled at village markets, hung amid the flies and street dust with the other animal meat, human flesh offered for sale. In America, some Indians believe that eating the flesh, and particularly drinking the blood, of those one has defeated in battle, will transfer the virtues, as theologians might call them, from one's late opponent to oneself, a mystical union between the antagonists, which no one I have consulted is quite able to explain to me. It raises the possibility that savages who appear to be enemies are in fact connected, somehow, profoundly, as in a covenant of blood, with war for them being thus a species of sacrament. This being so, as a practical matter out here, the warrior paths must be deemed holy, and transgression of them serious, to a degree difficult to imagine in the common British footpath dispute. We must either change our notions of the sacred, or come to terms with these nations, and sooner rather than later. Late one day, after his assault upon Armand, Mr. Dimdown answers a knock at the door of his room to find Mitzi Redzinger holding out his hanger cautiously by its strap. "I cleaned it up as best I could," she murmurs, gazing at anything but him. "A bit of soot, nothing worse, and I sharpened it for you." "You what?" "Armand has taught me how." She has stepped into the room and shut the door behind her, and now stands observing him, surprised at how tattered seems his foppery in the daytime. No one sharpens this but me. This is genuine Damascus steel, for heaven's sake. Here, then, let us see the damage." Taking what seems far too long, he peers up and down the newly glittering edge, and is soon making ornamental lunges and passes in the air, presenting each leg in a number of times for her consideration, adjusting his cuffs and stock unceasingly. Appears that you may understand something about blades. A complicated assault upon a candlestick. Feels a little slow. Used to be faster. Is there a fruitful lawsuit here? Yes, perhaps I shall take Knockwood to court. If spring ever comes. Say, Fraulein, your cap. What do you think you're doing? The goose. She is untying her cap, then taking it off slowly, unbinding and shaking out her hair. She is making it ripple for him. She is getting it to catch the winter light through the window. She is so flabbergasting this macaroni with it that he seems to fall into a contemplative daze before the deep undulations, a dreamer at the edge of the sea. Outdoors, the snow is upon the glide yet again, and soon 'twill be night. She remembers all the leagues of snow-covered terrain between here and the Redzinger farm. All going dark, the city she cannot quite believe in that lies ahead, her father's resurrection and departure, her mother's visible change, and lastly her own, which she can as little command as explain. Breasts, hips, fluxes, odd swoons, a sharpening eye for lapses of character in young men. The Lord provides, her mother has told her. Wisdom comes to us, even as it appears to leave men. You won't need to go all the way to Philadelphia, nor much further than the town upon market day, so. He has begun apologizing for his assault upon the Frenchman. 'Twas vile of me. I know you are his friend. I wish there were some way. Simply tell him. Isn't it done among you? Go into that kitchen. You've seen his battery, the knives, the cleavers. Mrs. Dimdown raised no idiots, Fraulein. Oh, if you knew Armand. She laughs merrily. I am become a target for his instruments edged and pointed. There our relations appear at a standstill. But recall that no one here has ever seen Armand cut anything. That's why he's teaching me how to do it, so that I can do what he can no longer bear. Perhaps it is my mother's doing. He has forsworn violence in the kitchen, not only toward meat, but the vegetables as well. For as little now can he bring himself to chop an onion as to slice a turnip, or even scrub a mushroom. Perhaps you oughtn't be telling me. A man needs his reputation. But as a veteran bladesman, you would never take advantage of him, I'm sure. His face grows pink and swollen, a sign she knows she has been blurted at by young men. Feeling behind her for the doorknob, she is surprised to find herself several steps from it, well within the room. Mr. Dimdown, I trust you are well. Philip, he mumbles, actually, putting his hanger back in its scabbard. As you have confided in me, so may I admit to you that I have never, well, that is not yet, been obliged to, in fact, oh, I can see you have never been in a duel. She pushes aside some hair that may be screening the full effect of the sparkle in her eyes. Ruin! Ah! You must despise me. She shrugs, abruptly enough to allow him to read it, if he wishes, as a sympathetic shiver. We have had enough of fighting out where we live. It is not to me the novel thrill that some Philadelphia girl might think of it. Taking up hair that has fallen forward over her right shoulder, she shifts the locks back and slowly leftward, tossing her head from time to time. Ignoring this opening, all a fidget. Are you the only one that can see it? Or does everyone know that I have never been out? As if engraved upon my head or something. Calm, Philip. I'll tell no one. In lurches the landlord. Your mother's looking for you, miss, flourishing his eyebrows at them both. Trouble, mutters young Dimdown. He wishes to apologize to Monsieur Allegre. Mitzi quickly sings out. Isn't that it, sir? That is. Excellent. I can arrange that. And Mr. Knockwood dashes off. I'm putting my life in your hands here, says Philip Dimdown. No one else is what they seem. Why should you be? 'Tis only now that Mitzi at last finds herself a blush, this being her very first compliment, and a roguish one at that. He seems at once considerably wiser, if no older. And presently, in the afternoon lull between meals, the peace is made, the two men shaking hands at the kitchen door and commencing to chatter away like two daws upon a rooftop. Louisa comes by with a tray full of Dutch kisses, provoking witty requests, most of which, though not all, she avoids gracefully. Damn for a bun-brain, monsieur, as if I'd actually impale the greatest cook in the colonies. But your movement with the blade, so elegant, so professional. Not exactly the great fig, I regret to say, indeed, never closer to the real thing than private lessons at an establishment in New York from a Professor Tissonnier. But I knew him in France, oui! He once commented upon my braised pork liver with aubergines, offered to teach me the St. George parry if I'd give him the receipt. He was esteemed for that indeed, and for his hanging guard. I'd show you it, but I wouldn't want to nick up the old spadroon. Damascus steel, is it not? Fascinating. How is that moire effect done? By twisting together two different sorts of steel, or so I am told, then welding the whole. A time-honoured technique in pastry as well. The armourers of the Japanese islands are said to have a way of working carbon dust into the steel of their swords, not much different from how one must work the butter into the croissant dough. Spread, fold, beat flat, spread again and again, till one has created hundreds of these prodigiously thin layers. Gold beating as well, now you come to it, puts in Mr. Knockwood. 'Tis flatten and fold, isn't it, and flatten again among the thicknesses of hide, till presently you've these very thin sheets of gold leaf. Lamination, Mason observes. Lo, lamination abounding, contributes Squire Halligast, momentarily visible. Its purposes how dark, yet have we ever sought to produce these thin sheets innumerable, to spread a given volume as close to pure surface as possible, whilst en route discovering various new forms, the Leyden pile, decks of playing cards, contrivances which, like the lever or pulley, quite multiply the apparent forces, often unto disproportionate results. The printed book, suggests the Reverend, thin layers of patterned ink, alternating with other thin layers of compressed paper, stacked often by the hundreds. Or an unbound heap of broadsides, adds Mr. Dimdown, dispersed one by one and multiplying their effect as they go. The macaroni is of course not what he seems, as which of us is. The truth comes out weeks later, when he is discovered running a clandestine printing press in a cellar in Elkton. He looks up from the fragrant sheets, so new that one might yet smell the apprentice's urine in which the ink swabs were left to soften, bearing to sensitized nasalia sub-messages of youth and longing. All about him the word repeated in printed large type. Liberty. One civilian leads in a small band of soldiers. Last time you'll be seeing that word. Don't bet your wife's reputation on it, the quarrelsome fop might have replied. Philip Dimdown, returned to himself, keeps his silence. If we choose to take the romantic approach, we must, appeals Tenebrae. Of course he was thinking about her. How did they part? Honourably, he kept up the fop disguise till the end. Impossible, uncle. He must have let her see, somehow, at the last moment, so that then she might cry, bid him farewell, and the rest. The rest? Are Ives alarmed. After she meets someone else. Ah, groans Athelma. Never ends, adds cousin Depew.